number of Democrats saying that they are very concerned about EPA potential regulations coming down the pipe about Clean Water Act. They would essentially define water sources that the agency can and cannot regulate. We're back with our panel. Judge, this seems to touch a lot of different issues.
Well, it touches a lot of very profound constitutional issues about the right to own and maintain private property. This is not the Congress seizing this jurisdiction. This is an independent administrative agency proclaiming unto itself the power to regulate the tiniest bodies of water, even seasonal pools and puddles of water, on private property. This is authority that the Congress never gave to the EPA. This is authority that even the Constitution doesn't give to the Congress. Look, at some point, regulations become so burdensome, so onerous, it's the equivalent of the government taking the property, or the equivalent of the government being physically present on the property. They will drive small businesses and they will drive small farmers out of business because these folks don't have the wherewithal to resist it. Congress needs to stop it. It takes both houses of Congress to defeat a proposed EPA regulation. If both houses don't defeat it, it becomes the law of the land.
Ditches, drainages, ponds, natural and man-made, prairie potholes, and other occasionally or seasonally wet areas under federal control.
This is insane. One, this is not the Mississippi. This is water in a trench. This is the federal government coming on your property and regulating water in a trench. This is yet another example of the inexorable, inevitable, eternal expansion of regulatory bodies. This is not in the bill. This is something that Republicans and Democrats ought to make very clear in legislation is outside of the EPA control. And it does crush small business. The big business, agribusiness, has all the lawyers it needs. It's the little guy who's crushed, and that's going to be the result of this.
A Wyoming farmer built what's called a stock pond with state approval on his own land. The EPA threatened him with astronomical fines if he didn't remove it, even though the pond has shown benefits to the environment and despite the fact the EPA has no jurisdiction over livestock ponds. During the 14 months that the farmer has tried to explain this to the EPA, his potential liability has grown to $16 million. The farmer is Andy Johnson, and he joins us right now. Andy, welcome back to the program. I know that you were with us some months ago. So let me take us through the story here. You built a stock pond, and you got state permission. You didn't get EPA permission, and now they say that's an environmental hazard. Get rid of it or else. What are you doing about this?
Well, if I could, I'd like to just first say thank you to Pacific Legal Foundation for taking my case on and providing all the legal help for free. What we're doing about it is we just filed suit in federal court on Thursday. We're asking a judge to completely dismiss the administrative order that we feel is illegal and very abusive.
What did you do wrong? You just built a pond for your livestock? That's it? That's all you did?
Yes, sir. That's exactly what we did. We have all the state permits. State of Wyoming signed off on it, said that we're in good standing. Our pond is exactly exercised as permitted. The EPA came in and said that basically we did not ask for their approval, and the potential fines are upwards of $16 million at this point.
So you didn't ask for their approval. Did you know that you had to have EPA approval to build a pond?
No, sir, we did not. And actually our state never informed us, nor did they know that we needed any kind of federal permit whatsoever. And turns out that we actually don't. They don't have jurisdiction over this project. We're over 100 miles from the navigable water. We fall under the nationwide permit number 18, along with some other ones. There's 52, and we have the stock pond exemption. We have livestock. We're surrounded by working cattle ranches, and the EPA won't honor any of their own exemptions.
Well, what happened? Did they suddenly arrive on your territory, on your farm, and said, hey, get rid of that? I mean, unannounced? Did they just suddenly arrive?
Well, they just came into the picture right about when I was completing the project, and they said, well, you may or may not be in violation, but you need to prove to us that you're not. And I didn't understand what they were about, what they were trying to do. And then about 6 months later, they sent me an administrative order that threatened me with $37,500 per day of fine, and I was supposed to remove the stock pond, hire a consultant, revise a plan, and submit it within 10 days. This is the middle of winter. It was physically impossible what they were asking me to do.
You would think that you've got a slam dunk case to just chuck the government out of court. You would think, wouldn't you?
Well, you know, any sensible person would think that. You know, our water is actually 3 times cleaner as it flows through our pond. It filters. It's providing a tremendous environmental benefit. We have riparian habitat and wetlands when there was none before. We have deep water fish habitat that there was not previously. None of this makes sense. We're improving the environment, and when we feel that they should be commending us, they're coming after us, and not only me, but my family and my home. They're attacking us.
It makes your blood boil, it really does. Andy Johnson, though, look, thanks very much for coming on the show. Come back again. We want to know what happens with this thing. We really do. Andy, thank you.
Thank you.
The Environmental Protection Agency says it's going ahead with a new federal rule that it says will protect small streams, tributaries, and wetlands, despite a court order that blocked the measure in 13 central and western states. Opponents say they'll keep fighting. 4 senators, 2 Democrats, and 2 Republicans wrote an opinion column against the rule, saying the EPA has created considerable and potentially costly confusion for many American businesses and communities who are just trying to do their jobs well. The EPA says the rule simply clarifies which smaller waterways can be protected by the federal government. But opponents call the rule an example of federal overreach, and Pat, they fear more regulations of nearly every stream and ditch on rural lands.
The EPA is out of control, ladies and gentlemen. That's the problem we're facing now, is these agencies that have been set up by acts of Congress who suddenly think they're a law unto themselves. And now the EPA is going to fly in the face of a clear judicial mandate to stop what they're doing, but they're going to do it anyhow. They are radical environmentalists. Now, here's what this order says. If you've got a drainage ditch out in your backyard, you are subject to the federal Waterways law, and the EPA can control that ditch or that little pond or that little marshland or that little area of water, whatever it is. And it just may come about when it rains hard, and then when it stops raining, the little ditch goes away. But they want to control everything. It is an overreach of massive proportion. And that organization has got to be controlled. But now we have an out-of-control president. We have out-of-control federal agencies. And they are dominating the life of the American people, and they are squeezing the life out of the American people by excessive regulations. You know, if somebody's going to run for president, the first thing he or she should do would be to cancel most of the regulations that have been put in place by these out-of-control agencies and let the American people get back to running their own show, which is what they ought to do. But this excessive burden that they're placing on the economy is one of the reasons we don't have any jobs.